Welcome to the Barbara O'Neill podcast. I'm Mark, your host, joined today by Barbara O'Neill, health educator, author, researcher, recognised for decades of work in nutrition, ageing, cellular health. Thank you, Mark. This topic matters deeply, especially for adults who feel tired, inflamed, heavier than before, yet still believe nothing simple can change that trajectory. I want to begin with a personal experience. I started taking 5 grams of creatine each day. No intense training, no extreme diet shifts. What followed surprised me. Joint stiffness eased, mental clarity returned, fat around the waist slowly released without effort. That response reflects biology, not coincidence. Creatine supports cellular energy at the mitochondrial level. Every tissue depends on that system: muscle, brain, immune defense. Aging weakens this pathway quietly. Many adults lose creatine stores year after year without realizing it. Fatigue rises, inflammation lingers, muscle fades, metabolism slows. One small daily input can interrupt that decline when used correctly. Creatine carries an outdated image tied to bodybuilding culture. That misconception prevents people who need it most from even considering its benefits. During this episode, we'll explain what 5 grams truly does inside the body, why inflammation responds, why fat loss follows, who benefits most, who should pause. This conversation focuses on restoration, not extremes. Precision matters more than intensity. If you value science-based guidance for healthy aging, subscribe to the Barbara O'Neill podcast. Each episode turns complex biology into practical daily decisions. Before we get into what 5G of creatine can do, we need to understand the battlefield inside an aging body. The silent trio, chronic inflammation, fat accumulation, and muscle loss, doesn't just happen separately. They feed one another quietly but relentlessly. If you don't address all three, you're just patching the surface. That's the cascade most people miss. Inflammation isn't always visible. You don't wake up with a fever or a red rash. Instead, it creeps in as joint aches, brain fog, slow healing, and stubborn weight, especially around the abdomen. Behind that is a metabolic fire smouldering inside your cells. At the center of it all is mitochondrial dysfunction. When your mitochondria, those microscopic energy plants, start producing less ATP, everything downstream begins to suffer. Muscles weaken, fat builds. Your immune system reacts by staying constantly alert, releasing cytokines like IL-6, TNF-alpha. Those are the messengers of low-grade inflammation. This shift doesn't take decades. For many, it begins in the early 40s, especially if stress is high and sleep is poor. By 50, you've lost muscle without realizing it. By 60, even basic movement feels slower. But most critically, the body's ability to regulate inflammation through energy production breaks down. That's where creatine enters, not as a muscle builder, but as an energy stabilizer. Creatine fuels the ATP-PC system, the fastest source of energy for cells under pressure. When that system weakens, the body compensates with inflammation and fat storage. It's not about calories, it's about cellular energy imbalance. We also see this in the brain. Neurons that lack energy lose synaptic efficiency. Cognitive performance dips. Inflammation rises in the hippocampus. Even mood regulation suffers. It's all connected to how energy is made and maintained. And muscle, ironically, is your biggest ally against inflammation. Skeletal muscle secretes anti-inflammatory minins when it's active and well nourished. But as muscle declines, those signals disappear. Fat takes its place, and fat, especially visceral fat, secretes pro-inflammatory cytones. So we enter a vicious cycle. Less energy, row, more inflammation, muscle loss, row fat gain, further inflammation. By the time symptoms show up in blood tests, the process is often deeply rooted. This is why people feel like their bodies have changed overnight. I didn't do anything differently, they say. But the truth is they didn't restore what was quietly leaking away, particularly creatine. Because as we age, our ability to synthesize creatine from amino acids declines even with a decent diet. Dietary creatine from meat and fish is often insufficient after age 50. Add in lower stomach acid and poor absorption, and even high protein eaters can be functionally deficient. Supplementation becomes not just helpful but necessary. That's the backdrop: inflammation, fat, muscle loss, energy failure, all interconnected. Which is why today's episode focuses not on the surface changes but the cellular roots of healthy aging. Rebuilding energy capacity is the first real step. It begins with understanding creatine not as an optional add-on but as a foundation. Once that foundation stabilizes, other interventions, diet, movement, sleep, finally start to work again. That's the reset most midlife bodies are craving. Not more restriction, more restriction. Most people assume creatine only works if you're lifting weights or sprinting. That's a half-truth. The benefits show up in athletes faster, but the deeper science, it points straight at adults over 50, especially those feeling weaker, slower, or inflamed. In fact, several studies now confirm that a daily dose of 35 grams improves muscle quality, brain function, and even metabolic resilience in people who don't exercise intensively. The key is consistency, not exertion. One of the most striking results came from a 2019 randomized controlled trial. Participants over 60 who took 5g of creatine daily without changing their diets or workouts saw measurable increases in lean mass over 12 weeks, not massive gains, but steady visible improvement in muscle density and strength. It's not just muscle. A study published in Neuropsychology Review showed improved working memory and processing speed in adults taking creatine daily for 6 weeks. The researchers noted enhanced phosphocreatine reinthesis in brain cells, meaning the brain had more fuel between signals. Then there's inflammation. A 2022 study looked at C-reactive protein, CRP, one of the most reliable markers of systemic inflammation. Participants taking creatine had CRP levels drop by over 20% without other interventions. That's a major shift for just one compound. It makes sense when you understand creatine as a phosphate donor. That extra phosphate is used to rapidly restore ATP in stressed tissues, muscles, brain, even immune cells. Faster ATP recovery means less oxidative stress, fewer inflammatory signals, and more metabolic flexibility. Many people ask if they need a loading phase 20 grams a day for a week. That protocol helps athletes saturate their muscle stores faster, but it's unnecessary for most people. The steady daily dose of 35 grams achieves the same saturation within 3-4 weeks, just more gently without the side effects some experience during loading, like water retention or digestive discomfort. The point here isn't urgency, it's long-term repair, restoration, not performance. Here's something else that's often missed. Creatine improves insulin sensitivity. A Brazilian study in 2018 tracked older adults with insulin resistance. After 3 months of daily creatine, fasting insulin levels dropped, muscle glucose uptake increased, and HOMIR scores improved significantly. This isn't just about energy, it's also metabolic regulation. It's safe. Long-term studies lasting over 5 years show no adverse effects on kidney or liver markers in healthy adults. Even among people with slightly reduced renal function, creatine didn't worsen outcomes when used at physiological doses. That's why I started it myself. I wasn't trying to bulk up. I was trying to restore something my body had been losing silently for decades. The change wasn't dramatic at first, but over 6 weeks I noticed fewer crashes, clearer thinking, deeper sleep. The kind of results that don't show in a mirror, but show up in how you feel waking up. That's what we should aim for. Interventions that improve the background hum of life, not flashy transformations, but reliable upgrades in resilience. Creatine supports that by acting at the mitochondrial level where aging begins. People think of supplements as something to stack up and rotate, but creatine is different. It's not a stimulant or a quick fix. It belongs to your biology. Your cells recognize it, use it, depend on it. You're not adding something foreign, you're restoring a baseline that once came naturally. That restoration opens the door for everything else to work better. Diet, movement, even sleep. The system becomes responsive again. All from 5G once a day. Not cycling, not megadosing, just giving your body back a tool it forgot it needed. For anyone over 50, especially those feeling stuck in their progress, this one compound might be the quiet shift that restarts momentum. But only if you give it time daily without skipping, without expecting fireworks. Because the best kind of transformation isn't the one that shocks you, it's the one that lasts. We often think of inflammation as a surface problem, swollen joints, irritated skin, digestive discomfort. But when we talk about chronic inflammation, we're looking deeper. It begins at the cellular level where stress accumulates, particularly in the mitochondria. Mitochondria aren't just energy factories, they're also early warning systems. When these organelles sense damage or dysfunction, be it from toxins, poor diet, infection, or aging, they trigger the immune system. What follows is a cascade of inflammatory signaling, starting with the release of cytokines like IL-1 beta, Illinois 6 and TNF-alpha. The problem is that signal never turns off. Mitochondria underperform. Cells compensate by producing reactive oxygen species, RO, and that oxidative stress keeps the immune system locked in a low-grade battle. Over time, tissues weaken, aging accelerates, and disease risk climbs. That's where creatine changes the landscape. Its role in energy metabolism is well known, but its ability to protect mitochondria and buffer against oxidative stress is just as important, especially for people over 50. Here's what the research shows. Creatine enhances the phosphocreatine system inside cells. This system acts like an energy reserve, keeping ATP production stable even during stress. When ATP drops, inflammation rises. When ATP stays steady, inflammation is reduced even without medication. It also helps stabilize the mitochondrial membrane. That's critical because when the membrane becomes unstable, it can leak mitochondrial DNA into the cytosol. The immune system interprets this as a danger signal, triggering an inflammatory response as if the cell were infected. Creatine reduces that risk by maintaining structural integrity. There's a 2021 study in Cell Reports that showed creatine supplementation lowered inflammatory responses in immune cells exposed to metabolic stress. The mechanism: enhanced ATP buffering and downregulation of inflammasome activation. That means fewer inflammatory signals sent to the rest of the body. What's fascinating is how this plays out in people with autoimmune conditions. Some early clinical trials suggest that creatine helps reduce symptom severity in diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. It doesn't replace treatment, but it supports mitochondrial function in ways medications often can't. We also see a crossover effect in neuroinflammation. Brain cells, particularly microglia, respond aggressively to energy shortages. Supplementing with creatine gives those cells the fuel to stabilize themselves, reducing the risk of excessive immune activation in the brain. That explains why people report not just physical recovery, but clearer thinking, better mood, and deeper sleep after several weeks on creatine. It's not psychological, it's biochemical. Let's not forget immune cells themselves. T cells and macrophages require bursts of energy when activated. With age, their responsiveness declines due to energy depletion. Creatine helps restore that responsiveness, making the immune system both less reactive and more intelligent in how it responds. In essence, creatine shifts the immune state from hypervigilant and exhausted to balanced and ready. That's the kind of regulation modern aging needs. Less blanket suppression, more energy-directed precision. The most exciting part, this isn't theoretical anymore. We have blood markers, CRP, IL-6, ESR, that consistently improve after creatine use, even without lifestyle changes. That means your body starts recovering in the background. While it's not a cure-all, it's a foundational tool. No drug can mimic the cellular intelligence of restoring your own energy systems. That's the future of anti-inflammatory therapy. Fuel the cell. Don't just block the symptoms, which is why 5 grams a day isn't a performance enhancer. It's an inflammation stabilizer. Quiet, reliable, and profoundly biological. One of the most common objections I hear about creatine is, doesn't it make you gain weight by retaining water? That concern is everywhere in gyms, online, even in doctors' offices. But here's the truth. That idea is based on old studies, misinterpreted context, and sport-specific scenarios. It started in the 90s when athletes began creatine loading 20 grams a day for 5 to 7 days. During that short burst, the body retained intracellular water to support phosphate storage. But this was never fat gain nor systemic bloating. It was localized hydration inside muscle cells, which actually helps with function. More importantly, those were extreme doses. The daily 5-gram intake we're discussing doesn't trigger that effect in most people. In fact, multiple recent studies have shown stable weight and improved body composition after months of use. There's a meta-analysis from 2021 involving older adults who took 3 to 5 g of creatine daily. The findings: fat mass decreased, lean mass increased, and no significant water retention was reported. That's real progress, especially in populations dealing with sarcopenic obesity. That's the hidden opportunity. People think they're gaining weight when in fact creatine helps shift weight in the right direction from fat to functional tissue. It doesn't trap water outside the cells. It hydrates where energy is produced. That's a very different story. Here's something even more surprising. Creatine appears to lower visceral fat, the dangerous kind around your organs. A small study in overweight middle-aged adults showed reduced abdominal circumference after 12 weeks of creatine without any change in calorie intake or exercise routine. We're talking about metabolic recalibration, not just weight loss. When cells have more ATP, they become more efficient at nutrient partitioning, directing glucose into muscle instead of storing it as fat. That alone can make a major difference in fat accumulation over time. Plus, creatine indirectly boosts motivation. When people feel stronger and clearer within 2 to 3 weeks, they start moving more. That spontaneous movement burns more fat than most realize, and it happens without forcing behavior change. There's also an overlooked hormonal link. Creatine has been shown to reduce levels of myostatin, a protein that limits muscle growth. Lower myostatin means your body becomes more efficient at building and maintaining lean tissue, even in your 50s and 60s. Less fat, more strength. Which brings us back to the myth. The fear of water weight is preventing people from accessing a tool that reshapes the body at the cellular level. If anything, creatine helps people look tighter, feel stronger, and store less fat without dehydration or stimulants. The scale isn't the best measurement here. The mirror, your energy, your strength, those are better indicators. Creatine changes tissue quality, not just numbers. And let's not forget, fat loss without inflammation is the goal. When you reduce visceral fat and support mitochondria simultaneously, the results last. They're not based on stress or restriction. They're based on restoration. That's the kind of fat loss we should all be aiming for. Sustainable, anti-inflammatory, and energy-driven. Creatine doesn't force your body to burn fat. It gives it the capacity to stop storing it unnecessarily. Creatine is remarkably well tolerated, but like any intervention, it's not for everyone in every context. The majority of healthy adults, especially those over 50, can benefit greatly from daily supplementation, but we need to look at the individual first. People who are losing muscle despite eating well, feeling inflamed, or noticing slower recovery are often ideal candidates. That includes postmenopausal women, sedentary adults entering their 60s, and even those dealing with early signs of cognitive decline. If your energy drops midway through the day without explanation, this could be the missing piece. It's also an excellent choice for vegetarians and vegans. Since creatine is found naturally in meat and fish, plant-based eaters are often functionally deficient. That shows up as fatigue, poor strength progression, or mental fog. Supplementing fills a gap they don't even know they have. But there are situations where caution matters. Anyone with pre-existing kidney disease, especially those with elevated creatinine or low glomerular filtration rate, should consult a doctor before using it. Creatinine itself is not harmful to kidneys, but its breakdown product, creatinine, can confuse lab results if your renal function is already compromised. Pregnant or breastfeeding women should also hold off, not because of known harm, but because the data is limited. And for those taking medications that affect water retention, such as corticosteroids or certain blood pressure drugs, monitoring is advised. Children and teens involved in sports may benefit under professional guidance, but 5 grams a day is designed for adult physiology. Always adjust by age and body weight when considering younger users. The good news for most healthy adults, 5G is both safe and powerful. You don't need cycling, you don't need loading, you need consistency. When matched with your biology, creatine becomes one of the quietest but most reliable allies in aging. Well, the optimal daily dose is 5G of creatine monohydrate. No loading phase, no cycling, just consistent daily use. This dose has been proven safe and effective for older adults in long-term studies. Take it once a day, anytime, morning or afternoon. While some prefer it around exercise, what matters most is consistency, not timing. Creatine works by building up in your cells, not by short bursts. Mix it with warm water, a smoothie or a small meal with some protein or carbs. That helps with absorption and reduces any chance of bloating. If your stomach is sensitive, split it into 2 smaller servings, 2.5 g in the morning and 2.5 g later in the day. Just don't skip days. Also drink enough water daily. Creatine draws fluid into cells to work properly, and hydration supports that process. Simple, safe and powerful. This is how one habit supports energy, strength and aging from the inside. When taken the right way, just 5 grams a day, mixed well and used consistently, creatine becomes more than a supplement. It becomes a daily foundation for strength, clarity and resilience. It's not about quick fixes, it's about steady support for your biology. And the science is clear. Small input, lasting results. Thank you for joining us on the Barbara O'Neill podcast. If today's episode brought value to you, please like, share, leave a comment and subscribe. Your support helps spread smarter aging to more people. Take care of yourselves because that's where real health begins.